Hello, how's everyone doing today? We're here with two special guests, Walter Block and Roderick Long. Walter Block teaches at Loyola University. He is an Austrian economist. And Roderick Long teaches at Auburn in philosophy. Today's debate is thick versus thin libertarianism. And I guess, I don't know if I should explain it because they'll probably explain what those things are. But I should admit, in fairness, my view. And my view is that I am both a thin and a thick libertarian. I am a philosophically thin and physically thick. So that is my view. I wish I was not both, but I am. And I guess with that, I'll leave, 10-minute introductions. So who wants to start first? I really don't have a preference.
Roderick, you want to, or
okay.
Go ahead, start.
Sure, since I'm the one defending the concept, I guess. All right, so here's how I understand the difference between thick and thin libertarianism. So as I understand it, thin libertarianism is the idea that there are just two possible relations that any value or commitment can have to libertarianism. On the one hand, can be directly entailed by libertarianism, directly entailed, for example, by the non-aggression principle, or either entailed by it or ruled out by it. So it's either logically necessary or logically prohibited by the non-aggression principle. So that's one relation. The other relation is just that it's an optional add-on. The value is one that is neither entailed by nor prohibited by the non-aggression principle. It's just something you can add on. The additional value might be a nice value, or it might be a nasty value, or it might be neutral, but it has no particular connection, positive or negative, to libertarianism. Thick libertarianism says that there's a third way that a value or commitment can be connected to libertarianism. The claim is that there are some values or commitments that are not either logically entailed by the non-aggression principle or logically prohibited by it, but nevertheless their connection is stronger than just sort of some additional thing you might care about. There are things that you should. These are values that libertarians, as libertarians, have reason to care about, even though they're not entailed by libertarianism. So let me just give the three main kinds of example. There are more, but I think these three are the main ones. So, and this terminology is coming from Charles Johnson. So there's application thickness. Application thickness is the idea that there are values, additional values besides the non-aggression principle that you need in order to apply the non-aggression principle. So, for example, the non-aggression principle says, you shouldn't aggress against people. But then you can ask the question, well, what counts as people? Do newborn children, do fetuses, do very smart animals, do severely mentally disabled people, do androids, do corporations? And if you don't have answers to those questions, then the non-aggression principle doesn't tell you what to do. It just says, don't, it'll be just like saying don't aggress against Schlozniks. If you don't know what a Schloznik is, it's not informative. So the non-aggression principle needs some, for example, some question about what counts as a person. And the answer to the question of what counts as a person is, I suggest, not going to be completely value neutral. It's not going to be a purely scientific question. There are going to be values involved in determining that, and that means you need those values in order to apply the non-aggression principle. So that's the first flavor of libertarian thickness. Another one is strategic thickness. This is the claim that there's some values that even though they are not entailed by the non-aggression principle, are ones that have to prevail in society if the non-aggression principle or commitment to it is likely to be stable. Or alternatively, they're not ruled out by the non-aggression principle, but they're values that, if they were to be widespread, would make a societal commitment to the non-aggression principle unlikely to be stable. So imagine a group of libertarian Nazis who accept all of Nazism, to all the traditional Nazi values, with one exception, which is that they are committed to implementing Nazi values solely by voluntary means. So there are all these races they think should be exterminated, but they're against you doing it by force, so they'll try to persuade them to be exterminated, or they will try and pay them to be sterilized or whatever. So they'll try to convince them to go into the death camps voluntarily. Would that be consistent with libertarianism? Sure, but would a society like that if that were the widespread value, be likely to remain libertarian if their main values and commitments are these Nazi values? And I'm thinking not. It's going to be hard for them to care so much about non-aggression if they, if they care so much about values that they're constantly going to be frustrated in implementing by these, these silly non-aggression principles. If you really think that certain people are grossly inferior and should be wiped out, it's going to be sort of odd for you to care so much about their rights. It seems as though you're not going to have a stable commitment to libertarianism unless you have this, these further more tolerant and humane values. And then finally, there is grounds thickness, which is the idea that there are certain values that aren't entailed by libertarianism itself, but they may be entailed by the best reasons for being a libertarian. And so therefore, if the best reasons for being a libertarian say that you should also care about X, then it would be unreasonable to be a libertarian and not care about X, because you're going against what the best reasons are for your view. Now, opponents of thick libertarianism often ask, well, are you saying that these additional values are part of libertarianism? Well, we usually don't use the phrase part of, and I think it's ambiguous. If a part of, you mean an essential or necessary part, such that nothing counts as libertarianism unless it includes these values, then no, we don't say these additional values are part of libertarianism. But there's a broader sense of part where we might want to say so. For example, my arm is part of me. But it's not a necessary part. You could chop off my arm. I hope you don't. I'm not hereby giving permission to Walter to chop it off. But, if you chopped off my arm, I'd still be me. I wouldn't cease to be me. So in that sense, my arm is not a necessary part of me. It's not a necessary condition for my identity as me. But nevertheless, it is a part of me, and more, it is, it's a part of me that's, not just an optional add-on. It's not just like some weird glop that grew on me or something. It's something I ought to have. I'm not in a proper healthy condition unless I have this. So I want to say that libertarianism isn't in a proper or healthy condition unless it has these add-ons. But just as I could exist without an arm, libertarianism can exist without these values. But it's what I think is sort of a defective or incomplete state. So that's the view I'm defending.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. Very well spoken. It's a pleasure to be in a debate with you, Roderick. I regard you as a good friend. I'm sure you reciprocate that. We've had we've had many meals together and many friendly debate, and I regard this as a very important way of getting clear on our differences. I guess I'm more what's the word, visual than you, because I have a what do you call it? A diagram here. And it's...
I concede defeat.
Fair enough.
Is that instruction I should take a nap now?
It's a very boring diagram, but it looks like an Indian teepee. I hope I'm not being politically incorrect in saying Indian, maybe Native people's teepee, where there are a bunch of sticks and they sort of meet near the top of them like a teepee would. And at the top of them, I put the NAP, or the non-aggression principle, based on private property and homesteading. And below it is the implications of libertarianism. And above it would be, I think, what Roderick, you call grounds for being a libertarian. For example, what are the grounds for being a libertarian? Well, there are many different grounds. Some people might be utilitarians, and they think that if we have the NAP and property rights based on homesteading, we'll all be richer, or we'll have a GDP that's higher. Or maybe it's religion. God says that we should have the NAP, or maybe it's natural law. Murray Rothbard has found that for a while. Hans Hoppe has this argument from argument about which we've discussed, which isn't really relevant now, but it's just one more possible grounds for libertarianism. The way I define libertarianism is from the NAP down. Namely, what are the implications of it? And that's all libertarianism is. The other is we might have, many very different reasons for being libertarian, but I think what all libertarians have in common is that we agree to the NAP and we try to find out what the implications of it are. So whereas the way I see thick libertarianism, that's thin libertarianism. Just the NAP and the implications of the NAP, and that's it. and the you sort of wear your libertarian eyeglasses, and of anything, whether it's
I've got them too.
feminism, you don't have libertarian. You have thick ones. I have thin ones.
Fair point.
Whether it's feminism or bossism or unionism or a hierarchy or any kind of issue, we ask only one question: does it violate the NAP or not? And if it doesn't violate the NAP, it's legitimate, and people shouldn't go to jail for it. And if it does violate the NAP, well, then people should go to jail for it, or should be punished or stopped in some sort of way. For example, take this case where the baker and the photographer and the florist are asked by a gay couple to help out with their wedding, and they decline, and the law says that they have to, and I think the baker was fined like $100,000 or $130,000. Well, for the thin libertarians, it's very easy. This is crazy. I mean, people have no positive obligations. They have no obligation to help out at a wedding that they don't approve of on whatever reasons they don't. They have no right to beat up or kill the gays, God forbid, so to speak. I'm an atheist, but what the heck. But they have no positive obligation to do it, whereas now, the way you describe thick libertarianism, I think you would have to say that the baker should not be. Am I correct on that, Roderick? Let me just pause for a second. That the baker should not have to pay a fine for refusing. Would you agree? Of course,
the baker should not have to pay a fine for refusing.
Beautiful. Okay, but a lot of thick libertarians, not you now, but a lot of thicksters, thick libertarians would say yes, he has to, he should, and they add on. It's sort of like a Christmas tree. They add on all sorts of irrelevancies to libertarianism. Like I got into a debate with somebody, and I talked about leering. Leering at a woman, sort of, getting your eyes bugged out, and I said that shouldn't be illegal, whereas rape should be illegal, and I was trying to make a distinction between rape and leering, and this guy had at me and said, this is no good because leering, violates something or other, and the same thing with bossism and discrimination and feminism and hierarchy and corporations and all that. Maybe we don't really have that much to disagree with. I'm happy to see that thick libertarianism isn't as bad as I thought it was, because that's a key element. For me, libertarianism, thin libertarianism, is the question: what should just law be? And just law should be you uphold the NAP and nothing else. Okay, now with regard to your application business, yes, I mean, obviously we have to make some determinants as to what constitutes a person. I mean, the smartest animals, I guess, are chimpanzees, or who are those guys that swim around, dolphins. But suppose that suddenly they became doubly or triply smart. Well, the way Murray Rothbard answers that is that if they get smart enough to be able to demand their rights or articulate their rights and promise to respect our rights and deliver on that, and namely respect our rights, well, then we have to consider them human beings. So I don't think that it's necessary to involve thickism in this regard in order to promote libertarianism. Now, the idea is, the way I understand it, that libertarians should be concerned or care about or be interested in these other issues. Well, libertarians should be interested in a lot of things. We should be interested in losing weight. I think we're all thick libertarians in the sense that we're all a little overweight. We should.
I'm the only one who's consistent. I'm both physically and intellectually.
That's right. You're the only consistent one.
So I'm trying to become inconsistent in that way.
Dan and I are inconsistent, but we should be concerned and interested and care about all sorts of things under the sun. I don't know, music, chess, whatever, but it's got nothing to do with libertarianism. Now, take these Nazis, my buddies, the Nazis, the voluntary Nazis. I love the voluntary Nazis because they keep their goddamn mitts off of everyone else, and they hate Jews and gays and whoever else, but what the heck, that doesn't bother me. Now, the question of whether libertarians will be more stable and more likely to, that's up here. that's relevant to libertarianism. It's relevant to libertarian strategy, I agree, but I'm trying to get clear on what libertarianism is. And, there's these bleeding heart libertarians who, they're really weird now. It's really unfair of me to blame you for them, but it's sort of a thick libertarian group, and of which you're part, and Johnson is part, and Sheldon Richman is part. And I think what you're doing, I think you do it very well, because you're very clear that there's no law against any of this stuff, but a lot of them, it's sort of a gray area. Now, I have to introduce another concept, and that's thick libertarians who are left-wing and thick libertarians who are right-wing. You are a left-wing, if you don't mind me calling you a lefty, on thickism, because I'm sorry?
I forgive you.
Okay, thank you. And now there are other people who are right-wing libertarians who take the opposite view of you, say, on homosexuality. Ayn Rand, I'm not sure about her view on homosexuality, but Hans Hoppe has said somewhere that, the homosexuals, we have to look askance at them or something. And what you would say is we have to look askance or be concerned about people who hate homosexuals. And that's why they call me Walter Moderate Block. I take no left or right view. I'm just a moderate libertarian, a thin libertarian, and I take no view. And these are really empirical issues. And it's just a supposition, an empirical supposition, that left-wing libertarianism will help, or rather left-wing concerns like we shouldn't be Nazis, but maybe we should be commies. Like you're giving me the voluntary Nazism business. The right-wing person would give you the voluntary commie thing. Well, maybe what we should do is get rid of voluntary socialism, or look askance at voluntary socialism, because maybe voluntary socialism would upend us. And I say I don't really give a rat's rear end. I do. I'm interested in the strategy, but first we have to get clear on what libertarianism is. And what libertarianism is, as far as I can see, is very, very parsimonious, Occam's razor, the non-aggression principle, that's it. Whereas I accuse you folk, you people, that's politically incorrect, but what the heck, of muddying up the waters and bringing these other things involved in libertarianism. And there should be a sharp distinction between strategy and what libertarianism is. And I accuse you of conflating this, I guess conflating is a good word, maybe not in your mind, but in the mind of a lot of other people.
Okay, well now I will respond with an accusation of my own, which is, you've endorsed what seems to be a more radical version of thick libertarianism than I have, which is that you are on record saying that those who do not support Ron Paul are not truly libertarians. It's on LouRockwell.com. It was exchanged with Wendy McElroy. Yeah. Now, what you drew a distinction between being a libertarian and libertarianism. You said that libertarianism doesn't entail supporting Ron Paul, but you said that any person who doesn't support Ron Paul is not a libertarian, because you said being a libertarian involves doing the things to support liberty. So you said that. That's online. So you have had your thick moment. I think it's the wrong thickism, both in content and in. I don't think that these things are part of being a libertarian. I mean, I don't think that it's required to be a libertarian that you have any of these thick values. But anyway, so you have waded deeper into this swamp than I have. Anyway, so that's my harsh accusation. But let me give you an example of I don't think there's any actual person like this, but here's an example of a possible libertarian. So imagine a libertarian who combines bad economics with bad ethics in the following way. They believe that the free market would cause widespread chaos, starvation, suffering, environmental degradation, mass starvation, etc. That's what they believe in economics. However, they like all those things. They like mass starvation, they like social chaos, and so forth, and therefore they're libertarians, because they said their reason for being a libertarian is libertarians would cause all this social chaos, and we love social chaos, so there's a libertarian for you. Now, I'm willing to call that person libertarian, but it seems to me there's a serious problem. Now, as long as they continue holding that combination of views, then they will, they'll act in accordance with libertarian policy and so forth. But first of all, would you really want to make common cause with them? You can say, here's a great, libertarian, and here's their argument for libertarianism, which is libertarianism causes mass starvation, and that's cool. But also, of course, there's the worry about them is that if their economics ever gets better, then their behavior will become worse. If they ever figure out that the free market doesn't cause mass starvation, then they're going to fix something else that causes mass starvation, and there are economic policies that do that. You could just imitate Stalin or something, and so they would be. I think they both be an unreliable ally strategically, and just an unwelcome ally intrinsically, because their libertarianism is defective. It is libertarianism. I'm willing to call it libertarianism. I'm more generous than you were to Wendy McElroy. I think that this person's libertarian, but they're a crappy libertarian. They're a libertarian. They're a libertarian because they believe that libertarianism is going to cause mass starvation, and they're in favor of it. So, So anyway, so that sort of hooks in with the grounds and the strategic stuff. On the application side,
Roderick, could I interrupt
go
you?
ahead. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
You've given me two things, and maybe let me have a chance now to reply, and then we can go on to the next thing. Okay, thank you. I knew you'd be amiable, and I knew we'd get along. Some people just like to filibuster, and
you have to be amiable to be a libertarian.
There we go. Let's both attack our moderator.
Okay, right. He's evil. Look, I remember having at Wendy McElroy, who I regard as a magnificent libertarian, as I regard you as a magnificent libertarian, very creative, very intelligent, brilliant. Superlatives fail me here. If I said Wendy was not a libertarian, I misspoke. I apologize for it. I don't think I said that. I think what I was doing, or as I remember it, I'd have to go back and look at my exact words, but what I was trying to say is we were discussing strategy. Now look, there are various ways to promote liberty. There's the way you and I do it as professors, as intellectuals. We write articles, we write books. There's the Free State Project in New Hampshire is a way of promoting liberty. There's the seasteading. There's the Mises Institute. There are other think tanks that promote liberty. There's, I don't know, as Uncle Mao said, let there be 1,000 blooms or something, or 1,000 flowers. There must be 1,000 ways to promote liberty. Well, maybe not that many, but many, many different ways of promoting liberty. And for me to say that if you eschew, and one of them is politics, and for me to say that if you eschew any one of them, you're not a libertarian, that's just crazy. So if I said that, I apologize for it. What can you do? You make mistakes. That's why they put rubber at the end of the pencil. I don't think I said that.
Do you still use a pencil?
Well, I'm low tech. I think my criticism of Wendy was not that she's a libertarian, but because she doesn't support. But I think what she was doing is attacking Ron Paul and attacking voting. And there I think she's entirely wrong, and I think that's an entirely different issue. So I would never say that a person isn't a libertarian because they say don't support the Free State Project, or they don't support the activity that you and I do in the classroom. That's crazy. But to attack Ron Paul when Ron Paul, on a strategic matter. Look, in my view, the two people who were responsible for converting more people to libertarianism than any other two people, head and shoulders over third and fourth and fifth place, are Ron Paul and Ayn Rand. Ron Paul, and now to attack him on strategic grounds, it just seems to be ludicrous. So I don't really think I was thick. Now let's the way I heard this other point they were making about, if you think that liberty will bring mass starvation and you favor mass starvation, the way I heard it was a Keynesian libertarian. You think that the best way to promote markets is through government, through the Fed and monetary policy and fiscal policy, but it's the same thing. I agree with you. I would call them allies. I will make common cause with the devil himself. If the devil is a non-libertarian, I'll debate him and try to convince the devil that he's wrong and he should uphold liberty. I agree with you that this is a little weird, but what the heck, as long as they're consistent, just like the Nazis. I mean, you're sort of giving me the Nazi case again, only in a little different way, a very clever way. And I would say that, as long as they have the view that liberty will bring chaos and starvation and unemployment and whatever, they're libertarians. And as soon as they learn economics and they realize that it doesn't work out this way, well, then they might change. They might say, look, for us, the key is chaos and starvation, so we're giving up libertarianism. Okay, so then they're not libertarians. But right now they're libertarians. I admit it's a little strange, but they're libertarians because they uphold the non-aggression principle, and the only thing that is necessary for libertarianism is the non-aggression principle. And I appreciate the creativity that you come up with to make these cases of the chaosists, libertarians, if I can call them that. But I don't think it refutes the thin libertarianism.
Okay, well, I mean, again, I agree with you that these people are libertarians, so that's not what we're disagreeing about. I think there are thick libertarians who might want to deny that they're libertarians, but at least in the canonical version of it that that I think of as sort of Charles as having formulated, these things are not preconditions for being a libertarian. It's just the question is, if there are certain, and we both agree that there are good things besides libertarianism that libertarians should care about. Where we disagree is that what I want to say is that some of those good things are things you have reason to care about as a libertarian. Whereas Beethoven's music is good, but it doesn't seem to me that there's any particular reason as a libertarian to care about it. Maybe there is, but I don't see one offhand. But that, for example, a culture, so let's take something less extreme than the Nazis or the people who want everyone to starve. A culture that is heavily pervaded by, let's say, deference to authority, and very big on deferring to social superiors, but it's all voluntary. So that's perfectly consistent with libertarianism. But a society like that, I worry, is not going to remain libertarian because the people who get deferred to are going to be in position to try and translate their social power into political power, and the people who are in the habit of deferring to them are more likely to let them do it. And so it's easier for a state to develop. So it seems that libertarians have a reason to be worried about a culture like that. It's a reason as libertarians, not just a reason as general human beings.
I hate to agree with you so much, Roderick, because we're going to ruin our debate. I mean, if we agree with each other too much, poor Daniel isn't going to have much of a debate. But I agree with you that we should care about them, and not only care about them, but care about them qua libertarian. Namely, because we as libertarians, thin libertarians, care about promoting thin libertarianism. And one way to promote thin libertarianism is to care about strategy. So I agree that not only should we care, but we should care about as qua libertarian or as libertarians. However, they say the devil is in the details. You're a thin libertarian, and rather a thick libertarian of the leftist variety. I'm not a thick libertarian, but I can take on the role of thick libertarianism as a right-winger to counter your views as a left-wing thickest, thickster, or whatever you want to call it. For example, this deference to authority, I defer to authority all over the place. I believe in the economic thing called specialization and division of labor. And in specialization and division of labor, when I go to my doctor, I sort of, do what he says. If there's a debate in physics or mathematics or, some esoteric field to me, I defer to authority. I just don't know. That is, I defer to authority when there is a rigorous debate among the people. So, for example, I think in physics they're having a big debate over whether something is a string or a wave or something like that. And whichever way those guys decide, I'll say, okay, well, I don't know anything about it. And if you guys are all agreed that it's a particle or a string or a half each, fine. On the other hand, where I don't defer to authority is in the area of environmentalism and global warming and stuff like that. Because there, if you take the wrong view, the other side calls you a denier, and they start trying to lose you your job and take the Holocaust thing. Right now in Europe, if you deny the Holocaust or diminish it or demean it or say that he didn't kill as many people as he did, you can go to jail for that. So as a non-historian, I can't take up what they say with any confidence because there's not a rigorous debate. But if there's a rigorous debate, then I defer to authority. Look, I used to play the violin in an orchestra. I was a very bad player, and the conductor really knew music better than I, so I deferred as long as it's voluntary. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, there might be some danger that we should worry about if people have too much deference to authority. On the other hand, the right-wing thick line would be we should also worry about the other case where people have too little deference to authority, because if they have too little deference to authority, they're undermining specialization and division of labor, and then we get into economic autarky where everybody has to produce everything for themselves and we don't have specialization. So, but again, to me, we're now off topic. The topic is, what is libertarianism? And we agree, Roderick, as to what it is. We believe that the Nazi libertarians are libertarians. We believe that the commie libertarians are libertarians. As long as they don't try to impose communism, they can be libertarians. So we're really now disagreeing not over what libertarianism is, which I thought would be the subject of debate, but we agree on that. But really what we're now debating is, what is the best strategy? What is the best means? And here it's an empirical issue. And, you know, it's a matter of prudential judgment. And I don't have really strong and decided views on this. I have very strong views on what is libertarianism and what are the implications of it. What are the implications of it for immigration? What are the implications of it for abortion? What are the implications of it for any difficult issue? But you've been on record as supporting feminism and non-hierarchical non-hierarchyism and you're attacking bossism, and I now understand you much more clearly that you're not really attacking bossism. You're not saying that people who favor bossists and hierarchalists are not libertarians. You're just saying they're unwise libertarians. They're not doing a good strategy. And now on that level, you know, we can have a debate, and I don't really have that strong a view as to whether a hierarchy is good or bad, whether feminism is good or bad. I mean, there are certain things about feminism that are okay, that are compatible with libertarianism, and then there are other things like equal pay for equal work, which I think would be an utter disaster and are really contrary to libertarianism.
Okay, so on the point of authority, what I had in mind was deference to social authority. So not authority based on knowledge, but authority based simply on social status. So, you know, you defer to this guy because, you know, he's a baron and he lives in the castle or something, but not, or because he has a highly cultured accent, but not because of his knowledge. Was what I had in mind. Okay, on the other stuff, so I thought our debate was supposed to be about thick versus thin libertarianism. Now I think you're taking that to be a debate about what libertarianism is, whereas that's not what I'm thinking of it as. I'm thinking of it as a debate about what possible relationships there are between various values and libertarianism. And I'm saying that there are three kinds of relations when I'm taking the thin libertarians to say that there are two. When you said, well, as a thin libertarian, I am interested in promoting thin libertarianism, and therefore I care about these strategic things. Well, I'm going to say that is thick libertarianism. After all, there's nothing about you could think libertarianism is true and have no interest in promoting it, and that's consistent with thin libertarianism. You can say, yeah, I think this is true. I'm just like, just as the devil believes God exists, he's just against him. So you could think, yeah, libertarianism is the correct theory. Just I don't care about promoting liberty. So if you care about promoting liberty, you care about the strategy. If you think that you have reason as a libertarian to care about those things, I want to say that is thick libertarianism. Now you've been talking about strategy, but I want to say that about the grounds thing again. Now I don't want to get right now. This isn't a debate about left libertarianism versus right libertarianism. It's thick versus thin. So I don't want to get into the details of that. But just to say, part of the reason for opposing, let's say hierarchy and bossism isn't just strategic part, although I think that's relevant, but also grounds part. That part of the reason for being libertarian is that you're against pushing people around. Pushing people around by force is one reason, but one way of pushing them around, but not the only one. But finally, I want to get back to application thickness because I think this is a particularly important one. So consider a bunch of possible candidates for being persons with rights. You've got fetuses, you've got very young children, you've got severely mentally disabled adults, you've got the chimps and the dolphins, you've got robots, aliens, corporations, a bunch of things like that. All things that some people think are persons with rights and some think are not. In order to know how to apply the non-aggression principle, you have to be able to resolve whether the persons or not. And the question is, do you have to appeal to any value considerations to decide whether they're persons? You might think no. You might think no, it's just a matter of giving an IQ test. I don't know how you give the IQ test to the, to some of them. And I don't know how you decide, what the cutoff is. But, you might think it's just a purely, descriptive matter, but I'm inclined to think that's a value question in part, that you can't settle which things should have the status of person with rights and which ones can't, completely aside from value questions, which means that without some commitment on those value questions, you can't apply the non-aggression principle. It doesn't tell you what to do. It only tells you what to do if you have some additional information about how to identify the persons, and I think that identifying the persons is going to involve some kind of values or commitments.
Could you elaborate on that? Give me an example, like what kind of values would determine whether a chimp or a fetus or a robot or a corporation or a fetus, whatever, is a rights-bearing creature, and when it's not a rights-bearing creature?
Well, I think it's something about, so you consider the properties that serve the standard non-controversial cases of persons have. So, mentally normal adult humans, say. But then the question is, all right, which features of them are the most important that explain why they deserve the protection of rights? Is it their ability to formulate plans? Is it their ability to grasp moral principles? Is it their ability to pursue ends? I mean, you think of these various things that persons have. Which are the ones that are important? Because you could have creatures that could formulate plans but maybe couldn't grasp moral principles. So you're going to have to decide which ones are more important for personhood and which ones aren't. And it seems to me that's a value question.
Okay, fair enough. Let me respond now. If I said, as a thin libertarian, I care about strategy, I was wrong. Slip of the tongue. I'm not sure I said that, but I might have said it. And if I did, I was wrong again. What I should have said, or what I meant to say, is that most libertarians are interested in promoting it. Now, if you're a libertarian, a Nazi libertarian, or a libertarian that just doesn't care, and there are people like that, by the way, actual people that just, they're libertarians, but they don't care about promoting it. So I would distinguish between being a libertarian and believing in libertarianism. Those people believe in libertarianism but don't act as libertarians, and maybe that was part of my critique of Wendy when she was, not acting as acting as a libertarian in the sense of promoting libertarianism. So that would be thick, because certainly you could be a believer in libertarianism without lifting a finger to promote it. With regard to this value judgment, the way Murray answers that question is, first of all, it's by the species. Because look, when you sleep, or when I sleep, we can't plan, we can't have any coherence. If you gave us an IQ test or anything when we're asleep, we'd all fail it, because if you're asleep, you can't answer any questions. You just go by the species, and in my view, the fetus is a human being, because the sperm, rather the fertilized egg, is a human being. Because the sperm alone will not become a human being, even if put in whatever environment you want, nor will the egg alone, but the fertilized egg, if put in the right environment, will become a human being. So I think of the fertilized egg as a rights-bearing creature. By the way, I have to tell you a joke. Do you know what the Jewish view of when the fetus is viable?
Well, I know that the traditional view was at the first breath, right?
No, it's the heartbeat.
That wasn't viability though. That was when the soul entered the body, but that may be an older view.
Well, the joke is when it graduates from medical school.
Okay, sorry, I was going for the wrong thing.
Right. I think it's when the heart beats, but that doesn't really matter that much. And if robots can, I'm sure they'll be intelligent when they do their thing. And if they can promise to respect our rights and actually do it, well, then I think they're rights-bearing creatures. And if we go to Mars and meet creatures that, I don't know, look like a snake or God knows what, a kangaroo, or half kangaroo and half snake, and they can...
Oh, no, I hold the line of that.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll be moderate here. No snake and kangaroo, but anything else that, no matter what they look like, a blob or something, and if they can articulate and respect our rights, then they're rights-bearing creatures. So I think you're right that we have to answer these questions, but I don't think that this is worthwhile getting in a tizzy about changing libertarianism. I wanted to ask you about something else, and this was something that you and Peter Klein got into. You were making. Do you remember the Peter Klein criticized you on your views on corporations, and you were taking the view that correct me if I'm wrong or elaborate on this. Your view was that in the free society you wouldn't either you wouldn't have corporations or they wouldn't be as powerful or anything like that. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Debate you had with Peter Klein. I thought he had a sensible view on this. I thought he was right and you were wrong on this. But to me, the question is not so much who's right and who's wrong. The question is that this, you say now that the Nazis can be libertarians and all that, but do you really believe it? I mean, you were speaking, I think, as a thick libertarian, or maybe not. Maybe you were speaking just not as a social scientist. You were trying to figure out in the free society what would corporations look like. And I think you were in error, but not in error as a libertarian, but rather in error as a social scientist or as an economist. I mean, even though you don't have a degree in economics, I think you're a splendid economist. But I think on that, Peter was right.
I'm going to quote you out of context now.
Oh, okay, thanks. So I guess if you stick to the view, and you are, that the Nazis can, the voluntary Nazis, the New York Times, I hope, doesn't listen to this, because not only will they say I'm favoring slavery, but you and I will both get in trouble for favoring Nazism. But obviously, between the three of us and any intelligent,
yeah, you're the only pro-Nazi.
Part of it.
I'm sorry.
I just said you're the only pro-Nazi here.
Okay. You were a pro-Nazi too.
I haven't said anything, so don't.
Daniel is guilty of being a Nazi. Look, actually on the Nazi.
He looks more like a Nazi than either of us.
One time I was giving a lecture, and there were two young kids that came up to me, and they said they were Nazis. And I said, given this thing about I'll try to convert the devil, I said, look, we will give you a better deal than everyone else. You can have a concentration camp, you can have an oven, you can have a swastika, you can have goose stepping, you can even encourage Jews to go into the oven. You just have to do it voluntarily. Now, it's not everything you want, but it's maybe 3/4. So join us as libertarians. They sort of walked away giggling. But I think that, if you take that view, then we really have no debate except over strategy. And, strategy is interesting, but I was more trying to criticize you for violating the principles of libertarianism, violating what libertarianism is, as opposed to the best way to produce it or promote it or make it stable.
Okay, well, again, it's hard to say how much we're disagreeing about on the question of what libertarianism is, because there's a sense in which maybe we agree on this. I'm willing to say there's a sense in which you could just say libertarianism is the core non-aggression principle or something like that. The difference, though, is that as soon as you say that something is not necessary to libertarianism, then you just see it as an optional add-on. Whereas I want to say that there's a third relation. In addition to being directly entailed on the one hand, or just being an optional add-on on the other hand, there are the things, and sometimes you seem like something you agree with this and sometimes not. There are things that are not entailed by libertarianism, but which being a libertarian gives you some reason as a libertarian to accept, either because of strategy or because of grounds or because of application. There's some other ones too, but those are like the big three.
Well, I don't care about application that much. I think I've answered that. And I certainly don't care about grounds schmounds, but I do care about it as a matter of strategy, because not only do I believe in libertarianism, but I actively try to promote libertarianism. So as a promoter of libertarianism, it would be amazing if I weren't interested in strategy. It's just that, like feminism is associated with thick libertarianism. You've come out in favor of feminists. You call yourself a feminist, and yet there are certain things of feminism that are compatible with libertarianism, and then there are other things that are just, crazy and have nothing to do with libertarianism and are anti-libertarian. So maybe I would want you to be more careful when you come out in favor of feminism.
Well, I would say the same thing about feminism as I do about libertarianism. There are feminists who are whose ideas are pro-libertarian, and there are feminists whose ideas are anti-libertarian, and there are feminists whose ideas can go either way, and there are libertarians whose ideas are pro-feminist and ideas who are anti-feminist. If I were to reject the label feminist because some feminist ideas are anti-libertarian, or some major feminists have been anti-libertarian, or there's a heavy anti-libertarian mood pervasive in the feminist movement, then I'd have to reject libertarianism for the same reason, on the grounds that libertarianism has pervasive anti-feminism. So here we have two things I like, but in each case, both of them have, most of their proponents are against the other one. So it's like, I like both chocolate and vanilla, but most of the, I better choose other things, otherwise it's going to get into racial. I like both raspberry and grape. But it turns out that most raspberry people hate grape, and most grape people hate raspberry. And as soon as I say I like raspberry, all the grapes get upset. So as soon as I say I like grape, all the raspberries get upset. But I think that these tastes should go together. But I'm well aware that the grape people and the raspberry people don't get on, and a lot of the grape people want to crush all the raspberries, and a lot of the raspberry people want to crush all the grapes. But they're wrong. They shouldn't do that.
Well, I think there's a disanalogy here. I think that we're both libertarians, and the question as to whether we should support feminism or not should be peripheral, and we should only support it if it's compatible with libertarianism and not if it's not. Look, let's take chess. Some chess players are libertarians, and some chess players are not libertarians, I presume. Let's stipulate that that's true. But as a libertarian, I'm not going to say I'm pro-chess. Even if I thought that chess playing would somehow promote liberty, and it might, for all I know, because chess playing, you have to have a brain, and if you have a brain, maybe you'll see liberty better or something like that. I'm just making this one right off the top of my head, but I think I reject this analogy that feminism and libertarianism are sort of equal in your mind. Maybe now we have some real something that we disagree with, other than strategy. Because to me, libertarianism is, it front and center, and if feminism accords with it, then fine, and if feminism doesn't accord with it, well, then we reject that part of feminism. And it's the same with, homosexualism or blackism, black studiesism, or whatever these other movements are. I think we look at everything with libertarian glasses, whereas you want to look, one of your eyepieces is going to look through the world as a libertarian, and the other as a feminist, or as a homosexualist, or a transgenderist, or whatever the other possibilities are. And I certainly would disagree with that. I think libertarianism is front and center and the be-all and end-all of political economy, whereas feminism, it's got some good things and some bad things. So I'm sort of perturbed at you for equating the two.
Well, I think that I would see feminism and libertarianism as linked in, for example, both grounds and application. So in application, for example, I think that one reason that it's a lack of feminist consciousness often explains why people have failed to identify certain things as violations of the non-aggression principle that are. So, for example, historically, people often say, well, back in the 19th century, we had strong. We had a much more libertarian society than we have today. Even though women were excluded from most professions, there are all kinds of legal restrictions on what women can do and so forth. And people often think when they talk about what the economic freedom of the 19th century, they often have in mind the economic freedom that white males had. Actually, even there, I think the economic freedom of white males in the 19th century was not that great, but it certainly was greater than. But I think that a lack of feminist consciousness explains why so many libertarians can see a society in which only a small minority had any economic rights as a society of near laissez-faire, and that's an example of how feminist values can help in applying the non-aggression principle. It's a case where people fail to recognize how deep a deviation you have from the non-aggression principle just because they're not thinking about the fact that there are people who aren't men.
Well, I think that's a not unreasonable point. Note I don't say a reasonable point, I say a not unreasonable point. Guess it's about the same.
One does imply the other.
Yes. Look, obviously, when people say that we were freer in the 19th century or in the 18th century, they don't have that in mind, and they don't have in mind slavery. I mean, Dave Bowes is always criticizing people who say that, we were freer in the 19th century, in the early 19th century during slavery, but that's not what they had in mind. It's sort of like a no-brainer. Although I think you'll agree with me that we never should have given women the right to vote, and now that they have it, we ought to take it away from them. But the same goes for men also. Namely, no one should vote in the political thing because it's part of the statism. But I assume you'll agree with me on that. But I think you're making a reasonable point that feminism has something to contribute, because if people say that we were totally free, laissez-faire, and they forget about slavery, and they forget about the fact that women were, second-class citizens at best, or third-class citizens, or whatever they were. This is a contribution to libertarianism. But what feminism stands for now is just these harridans that are bitching and moaning, and they never had it so good, and yet everything is awful, and they're worried about the pay gap. And I think you'll go along with me as saying that wages are determined by discounted marginal revenue product, and women have lower marginal revenue product in the market because of unequal shares of housework in the home due to voluntary interaction. And yet feminists are always bitching and moaning about, there's the pay gap, and then the black people are always bitching and moaning that, we have to stop the gap between, educational gaps or something like that. These people are not libertarians, and what they're saying is antithetical to libertarianism, and they're trying to undermine libertarianism. So when you say you're a feminist, look, I'm a feminist in a very small sense, but not enough to call myself a feminist, because I agree with the point that you made, that here they are making a good point. But to call yourself a feminist, I mean, you might as well call yourself a socialist or a Nazi, because, look, the Nazis had some good things, too. I mean, they were against cigarette smoking, and they were, I don't know, in favor of good food or some other. They must have had some good things about them. But to say you're a Nazi because they had some good things is sort of a perversion of language. So I ask you to renounce feminism.
Right. Well, what you just said about feminism is very much like what the left says about libertarianism. Here you are bitching and moaning about taxes, and you never had it so good. You have more freedom than most people have had historically throughout history, and yet you whine and whine about taxes and so forth. So I don't think they have reason to be impressed by that. On the wage gap, we have talked about this before. And this also connects with things like firm size and firm hierarchy. The larger the firm is, the more it's insulated from market signals. When transactions within the firm are insulated from market signals, the harder it is to tell what the marginal revenue product of any given employee is, and therefore, in making those judgments, there's a greater possibility that employers are going to be guided by their prejudices and assumptions rather than the facts, because the larger the firm is, the harder it is to tell what the marginal revenue product is. So that's and of course I think that that government policies tend to reinforce larger firms and insulate them from market competition in various ways. So that's the way in which I think that feminists have a legitimate point about the pay gap, but they mistakenly think that the free market's the problem when it's government intervention that's at least a major part of the problem.
Well, I agree with you that there's a correlation between large size and government support or government subsidies or too big to fail. I mean, who could disagree with that? But in the free enterprise system, there is no such thing that the larger firms are more insulated from the market than others. They're insulated in the sense that they have to lose more money before they go bankrupt by definition. But other than that, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And if large firms don't have good wage policies, they will lose profits and go by the wayside. The history of economics is littered with large firms that are now gone by the board. But yeah, the feminists don't say this. You're putting a very, very good interpretation on feminism. What these feminists say is that they don't make these niceties about large size firms and insulation from market or anything. They just say it's unfair. The pay gap is 20, 25, 30%. And then you have all this stuff about I don't know, rape kind of stuff where if a man looks at a woman askance, like I was talking about leering before, they start getting all upset about that. Then there's this thing, I really can't say it publicly, but there was some guy who lost his job because he said, I'd like to F you right up the P. You were aware of what I'm talking about?
I can't imagine.
No, seriously. It was in all the news, and the feminists were just rabid about this, and the F word or something like that. And to me, it's just free speech, and they're not libertarians. You scratch a feminist, and you're not going to find a libertarian. Yes, they say some things that are vaguely.
If you aggress against them by scratching them, of course you're not going to convert them to libertarianism that way.
Well, I didn't mean to scratch them physically. I meant scratch them philosophically. You're a philosopher. You should know about philosophical scratching. But I'm sure you're just teasing me. But they're a very irascible bunch. They're very much against libertarianism. And again, I plead with you. I ask you to renounce this feminism, because you might as well, with the same logic, say you're a Nazi or you're a commie or whatever, because the Nazis and the commies also have some good things. But by and large, the feminism is just a horrible organization and a horrible philosophy. And I'm appalled that you, my buddy, my long-term libertarian friend, would call yourself a feminist.
Well, I see I see feminism and libertarianism as both flawed movements, but both seriously less flawed than Nazism. I think Nazism is mostly flaw. It's like flaw is its main thing. I don't think that's true of either libertarianism or feminism, although I think that they're both flawed movements. Libertarianism is flawed in its anti-feminism, and feminism is flawed in its anti-libertarianism. I know you don't like this equation, but this is how I see it. That I think that libertarianism and feminism have specialized in concerns about different things, and thus each has gotten really good at identifying certain kinds of problems, and has been sort of largely clueless about other kinds of problems, and that makes them both have trouble seeing the link between the problems. So if feminists have a good understanding of gender relations, but have poor understanding of economics, of libertarian and of government, and if libertarians have a good understanding of economics and government, but a poor understanding of gender relations, then it's going to make it hard for both of them to see these things as linked. Whereas wonderful left libertarians like us see the links and thus see where each side needs to be complemented by the other.
Roderick, let me ask you, you say libertarians have a poor understanding of gender relations. In what way do libertarians have a poor understanding of gender relations, other than some of them once upon a time said that things were better, we had more laissez-faire in the 1840s or 1830s when women didn't have rights? Is there any other flaw in libertarianism with regard to understanding of gender relationships beside that one oversight that some libertarians sometimes are guilty of?
Yeah, I think that libertarians tend to underestimate the extent of gender oppression and inequality today, because and I think part of the reason that they're tempted to do that is because they think that if these things exist today, this connects with, I think, a different problem that we've identified with libertarian movement is sort of the tendency to overestimate the extent to which we're a free market now. So that if you think we're mostly a free market now, then if you were to recognize the extent of this gender oppression, you have to think, well, that's consistent with the free market. And then you think, well, then therefore the only solution would be government. You don't want that. And so it just tends to make libertarians sort of veer away from the whole issue.
Well, I don't see any gender oppression, and this idea that
see, you're proving my point.
And the idea that libertarians see the present market as mostly free market. I mean, listen to Ron Paul and his view on the Fed. We're always talking about the minimum wage and rent control and taxes, and whining about taxes and whining about all. I mean, the idea that libertarians think that we have a mostly free market now, I think, is preposterous.
Well, I mean, sure, all that's true, but you will constantly see libertarians, people like John Stossel, for example, saying things like, "Well, this claim that you make can't be true because that can't happen on a free market. So these things you say about corporations can't be right because corporations can't do that on a free market." Now, it seems that argument works only if there's the implicit premise that we are that we're either a free market or close enough to a free market to make that argument go through. Now, they don't think it consistently. I mean, that's one of the gripes we left libertarians have about the mainstream libertarian movement, is that there's a tendency to oscillate between recognizing the extent of government intervention in the market and then sliding back to saying, well, this is how things are this way because the free market works this way.
Well, Roderick, I think, when you get into a boxing match, you're supposed to hit above the belt. This was a below-the-belt shot. I mean, John Stossel, as the libertarian exemplar, I mean, that's below the belt. I mean, I don't regard him as a leading libertarian theoretician. Now, if you said Hans Hoppe did something wrong, or Kinsella, or Wenzel, or me, or Murray Rothbard, okay, fair enough. But John Stossel is not a leading.
I've accused you of this in exchanges we've had too. I was just being polite by bringing in Stossel instead.
Well,
Stossel's sort of a substitute punching bag.
Accuse me of.
It's some of our online exchanges. I'd have to go look it up, but
I assume that implicitly that we now have roughly a free market.
That not that you thought that, but that you made an argument that would only work if that were true.
Do you remember what the argument?
I don't remember what it was, but it was a while back when we were each having various things online, responding to back and forth to the other, and that was a few years ago.
Well, I can't answer that because I don't have the specific.
I can look it up later.
Okay. Well, look, I'm sure I enjoyed this conversation. I always enjoy every conversation I've ever had with you, and I'm sure Daniel will be happy to have us on again. Maybe not in a month, but in 6 months or whenever. And here's your homework assignment, Roderick. Go look up these things where I am guilty of implicitly assuming that we're roughly approximating a free enterprise system. But we started a little late, and I have to get off because I have something else that I got to do, and I think you do too, Roderick. Mm-hmm. So let me take my last shot at you and just say that I enjoyed this conversation, and I think it was very illuminating, and I hope that the people in the audience will enjoy it.
Okay, always good to talk to you.
Thank you very much. I hope you guys like this. This debate was brought to you by The Political Cure. Please check out thepoliticalcure.com and The Political Cure on Facebook. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking the link below, Daniel the Sexiest. Anyway, great to have you guys on. And thanks for stopping by. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Goodbye, Dave.